Good morning and welcome to the new edition of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. We are at present living in a climate which is full of fear and people are scared. Lockdowns, restrictions, and even curfew are the order of the day. And all the governments have taken a plea that they are imposing these restrictions not to curtail the liberty of the people, but to prevent the spread of the pandemic. That's great. And why not? It's the bounden duty of every government to protect its citizens. And many times, some restrictive practices have to be put in place. But if the government itself violates those restrictions without any purpose, without any logical cause, then there is something suspicious, either about the very purpose of the lockdowns or the intentions of the governments. Would you believe that since COVID 19 began early this year, 7 million plus entries into Canada have been there? 7 million plus, more than 7 million people have entered Canada. And the Border Protection Agency, CBSA, Canadian Border Security, they admit that this should not have happened. What a tragedy that 7 million entries in the period of restrictions, lockdowns, quarantines. And the situation becomes worse when we see that the government ordered in some cases that the person coming should not be subject to quarantine. Are you being serious? Yes, I am. The border agency says that these exceptions were made at the behest of the government. So you can have lockdowns, still the number of the patient is so, and the funds can come in. The border closure to non-essential traffic, which is continuing until January 21 next year, has sparked confusion and questions about who can and who cannot enter. It was late March that the Canada closed its border to foreigners visiting for non-essential reasons. I happened to be in India at that time, and although a citizen, I had to postpone my return by a couple of months. But since then, more than 7 million people entered by land and by air. And they were Canadians and they were foreigners. The government says, well, this is actually a drop in bucket. Not many people came because in 2019, more than 7 million people would come in less than a month. But the government doesn't add that there was no restriction at that time and the people had no issue about being in quarantine when they came back. Okay, I can understand one group which is coming and going, and that's the truck drivers. There's another group who live in the border towns and have jobs on the other side of the border. Okay, but then both these groups are exempt from 14-day quarantine requirement. And that was imposed to stop the spread. But why did the government of Canada grant 1,700 special quarantine exemptions to the sports leagues and the business travelers. Would the sportsmen or the officials of the sport leagues or the business travelers, can't they be the carriers of virus? Are they fully protected? How do you know it? If an ordinary person comes and for 14 days he cannot stir out of his house, why these 1,700 exceptions? And look at the nationalities. As I said, I have no problem about truck drivers and the people living in the border towns who have jobs in the other country. But then the federal government advises Canadians to stay home. That's there. But then they say that when you come back, you have to quarantine for 14 days. Now, according to CBSC, they say that they have committed some mistakes. That's a normal thing. When the political bosses direct something to be done, the deniability factor is always booked in. Deniability means that the government say, well, we were not aware, this must have been a mistake, a genuine mistake, an honest mistake, which is only a way of passing the buck. But then, two things stand out. There are two large US companies. There's a shipping giant Uline Incorporated, and there's a retailer, Costco. All of you are aware of Costco, the huge box offices. And here, the CEOs of these two companies, with their attendant assistants, they were allowed to enter Canada and they were allowed to skip the quarantine in August. And during each of their short trips, and they came not once, not twice, but they came repeatedly. And they visited company owned operations in Ontario. CBS officers absolutely say that they should not have been permitted to enter, and if they were to enter, they should have undergone quarantine. But they came, they visited their operations, and they went back. They came again, and again they went back. And the return was never recorded. As a matter of fact, this shows a canker. These big companies, which can afford to spend millions and billions of dollars, are they? But this is a doubt lingering in my mind. Are they also contributing to the coffers of the political parties? And that might be a reason for giving them exemptions. Or are they likely to fund some individuals in one form or the other, in cash and kind? I have no proof of that. I'm just expressing a doubt. Typically, come in and just visit your operations should not be permitted, and this is what the CBSA officers admit. And if it should not be admitted, why was it done? And this is not only the CEO, the executives came many times from Costco. They were given an exemption legally by the officers. And the exemption happened the same day another group of US executives received the information. The whole thing stinks. Stinks because either the government is not serious about the spread of coronavirus. And it is using the excuse of coronavirus only to terrify people and become totalitarian, authoritarian, and dictatorial. Of course, we are all aware that the Honorable Prime Minister is quite enamored of dictators. He was very fond of Fidel Castro. He loves China so much so that he can endanger the security by permitting the training of the Chinese soldiers on Canadian soil, as I discussed the other day. Now, on the one side, people who from USA who want to visit Alaska have to go through Canada, and they have been punished many times, and now they are very, very tough. But on the other side, we have seen that non-essential reasons as visiting the factories, the people are being permitted. As a matter of fact, even one such action would be sufficient to label the action of the government as suspicious. It's always the sample which counts. And here is not one, not two, but dozens of the executives of the private companies, profit making organizations from USA, who visited Canada, could have been spreaders. And we know that USA is afflicted by this malady badly. Anybody can be a courier. And that is why all the international conferences are now done by web. So why could these chief executives and the other executives not have discussions or see the operations via satellite? They can afford that. Wherever they need to visit them. And why did the government permit them? And as I said, 7 million people coming. Out of that, 3.5 million I can easily write out who were legitimate. But still 3.5 million, the bell remaining. That rings a bell. That rings a bell, as I said earlier. Either the government is not serious and is only extending its tentacles, or government is serious, but sometimes the personal interest supersedes the national interest. Now, both these presumptions have a message, and that is that can we trust the government? The trust factor is the most important factor in the governance of any country. And when there is a repeated violation of trust, then that factor would naturally evaporate. If we do not trust the government, whom do we trust? They are supposed to be protectors, and they protect by default, are permitting those very actions which they have banned, prohibited for the ordinary citizens. I repeat, 7 million is a huge number. They come in. 50% of them are legitimate, like truckers or the people living in the border towns. They are permitted to come. People who come in have to quarantine for 14 days so that they are not no longer contagious and infectious. But when the government permits thousands of the people to come in who are non-essential and also exempt them from quarantine, then somewhere the bells start ringing. Are they ringing for you? Are you concerned both either for the honesty and integrity of the government, or for your safety? And if you are, should you not ask the questions? Why, on one side, we are being restrained, our activities are being checked, we have to maintain social distance, we have to wear the mask, we have to quarantine when we come even from one province to another province. But here the outsiders can come, be carriers of virus, and not a wink of sleep is lost, but they are given permissions to do so. This paradox haunts me. This paradox knocks the bottom out of the trust that we should have in the government. After all, whatever is best, administered is best. And when the administration is lax, discriminatory, suspicious, therein lies a danger to the civil society. Think about it. Thank you.